I'm Sean from Offload Rugby Media.
I'm Simeon from the TikTok Rap.
Guys, I'm Murray, also known as Blissful Rugby HQ.
And you're listening to the Rugby Connection podcast.
For the fans, by fans.
Hello and welcome to episode 4, I believe, of Guest Thursdays on the Rugby Connection podcast. We're joined today by special guest Scott Ferrara, also known as the Big Guy, from the Rugby Rant podcast and from Rugby United New York Supporters Club. Scott, thanks for coming on. Welcome to the show. How are you keeping?
I'm doing well, guys. Thank you so much for the invite. You know me, I love talking about rugby. I love having my fat face on podcasts. So, of course, when you guys were, first of all, congratulations on getting this podcast together. It's been wonderful so far. I mean, I've been listening and watching all of them. They're great. So it's just an honor to be on. Thank you.
No, thank you, Scott, for those kind words. So the first question I have for you is, how did you first get into rugby, and what's your rugby life like now?
Well, I think my story is typical of most rugby players right now in America, how they learn. You learn it a couple ways. You either learn it through your family, you know, your father played club rugby or your brother played club rugby. You learn it through kind of osmosis. You kind of know somebody who knows somebody, and then you kind of pique your interest, or you go to college, university, as you guys would say. And, you know, rugby's a club sport here, so they pretty much take everybody. And if you wanted to play a sport, you'd play it. So I kind of had a mix of all those. For me, I learned about rugby through a teacher in high school. He played club rugby, you know, and I guess pretty much just like everybody else in America, you learn the first two teams you learn are the Eagles and the All Blacks, right? That's kind of generally how guys learn. This was back when, like, you would have to, like, buy a match for like 75 or 80 American dollars per match to watch it on SatantaSports.com, and the feed was terrible and there was no commentary. So that was always fun to watch, like Tri Nations and all that, and bring up your mother's credit card. Yeah, and then going through that, actually playing like most people. I started playing at college. Again, I played 4 years there.
Sorry.
Listen, we're trying to do this. We're going international with this bad boy, so it's cool. Yeah. So I was saying before, you know, you have to pay for a lot of stuff. Obviously, paying for your own equipment, and sometimes you have to pay for guys to show up to play, especially if you didn't have the numbers. I mean, in particular, we had a women's team, and we had some women playing on the men's side if we didn't have the numbers. So I think that's a typical experience on how somebody in America is getting into rugby and their first playing experience. As far as right now, if you had a second part, I'm currently not playing. I had a injury when I was playing men's league hockey in my neck, and at that point I said, you know, I want to work and not be on disability, so I'm just going to step out of contact sports for a while. But, you know, I am a supporter. Obviously, I have the Rugby Rant show. You know, I run the Rugby United fan club. You know, I'm deep in the MLR. I'm deep into the Eagles. I at this point, I can call a handful of these guys really good friends, which is always nice to say. So, yeah, that's where I'm at.
That's amazing. I was quite interested to hear that. The one that caught me off guard there, Scott, was when you had to, like, rent an ambulance. Like, that obviously doesn't happen over here. It's all free. So that kind of was a bit interesting to hear. And the whole $100 for a year would be like a tackle pad's like $100. So there's your budget blown in one go. So
seriously, no, and the ambulance, you know, because you would want to make sure that it's there on site. You wouldn't want to. I mean, you could call an ambulance, obviously. You can call emergency services, but for our, you know, matches per the union, you had to have something on site. You know, God forbid there was a timely injury you needed an expert there for. So that was always fun because you'd always rent them and then they never show up anyway, and then you'd go on and you just play. But, you know, it's all the fun stuff.
That's totally different to how I'm guessing to how me and Sean would definitely, because we obviously have the medical professions, like the paramedics and the ambulance. They are on standby, but like there was no charge or anything. That's just really caught me off guard. I
mean, we're not talking like thousands and thousands of dollars. It would be like, you know, you're playing a match for however long, you say, probably rent them for 4 hours because you have an A side and a B side, right? And you'd say, okay, it's $100, and, you know, you'd pay them, and then probably 50% of the time they'd actually show up.
That's even worse. So you're a big rugby union New York fan, like Sean. How do you think they're doing in the MLR season so far? And what do you think they could achieve with the rest of the season still going on?
I mean, I'll start with the second part of that question. I think they can go all the way and win the Shield. There's a big Shield for whatever reason that the MLR has as their trophy. It's a little ridiculous. It's very hard to hold. It's very heavy, according to my friends in Seattle who've won it 2 years in a row. But I think RUNY can go all the way. They do have a bunch of guys missing out of their squad the next couple of weeks for internationals. You guys are used to that, with the Prem and 14 and all that. Americans aren't used to it because, to be honest, in 2018 and 2019, I think we only lost them for a week in the middle of the season due to how the season was scheduled. But because of COVID, we had to change the season, and the season got pushed into the international window. So now you're losing your guys, 2 or 3 matches before the playoffs, right? So that's, if you're fighting for a position. For example, RUNY lost both their starting locks and their open side flanker because they all start for Team USA. They lost one of their starting wings because he starts for Rugby Canada. And they lost one of their backup prop / hookers because he's the starting hooker for Brazil. So coming into a place where they're right now on the outside looking in for playoffs, it's kind of scary because you miss those guys. But as you guys know, next man up. So right now they're sitting in third place. And if they win next week and if they win the week after, they have a playoff spot, and they would play Atlanta for the semifinal. And then if they win, they would play whoever won the semifinal in the Western Conference. It's a typical American bracket style playoff that we play.
Yeah, because you've got the Western, like you just said, the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference. You mentioned Seattle because they were previous winners. I think I picked Seattle to be my MLR team just out of sheer laziness because I'm a Seahawks fan for the NFL, so you know what, Seattle, there we go. I'll just stick to the same place. It's easier that way. But what made me laugh is when they introduced the MLR, they did this big hype video, and obviously I never watched it the first season, but I watched the recap when it finished, and it said that Seattle won it and they were underdogs. I was like, it's the first season. How can they be underdogs? They're all on this. It's the first season. Nobody's favourites or.
Well, they were an underdog in the game. So that's so coming in, they weren't expected to win it. San Diego has had a really powerhouse squad in 2018 and 2019. But yeah, so it was more of reference to that matchup.
All right, that's fine. Because when I heard that, I was just like, "That's the first season. How can you have an underdog in the first season of a new tournament?" But that's fine. Thank you for clearing that up for me, Scott.
I love it. It's funny. We have a lot of international fans. I mean, specifically in the RUNY fan club, we have this one guy, Dennis from Paris, France, and he watches all the RUNY matches on TRN now for free. So if you want to watch MLR, you can catch it on the rugbynetwork.com or the Rugby Network app. It's free to anybody internationally outside of North America, and they show replays. So that's 4 or 5 matches a weekend you guys can watch while you're not watching the lines because of these COVID issues.
Scott, actually, I was going to ask you for.
It's going to be a bit tricky to slot in them.
Sorry, I cut across you there. Scott, I was just going to ask you, for people who aren't familiar or too familiar with Major League Rugby, would you mind giving a brief overview in terms of how the league started and how it's grown over the past couple of seasons?
Absolutely. So officially the league started, I believe, in 2015 with the first 4 owners coming together to say we're going to do this product. 2018 officially started where they actually had league play. At the time, there was only 8 teams. And pretty much it was just top 1 and 2 played each other for a championship. Moving into 2019, we rolled in with 11 teams. And then we had a formal playoff structure, which it mirrors this structure. Top 2 in the Eastern play and the top 2 in the Western play each other. Those winners play each other for a championship. 2020, they were going to actually have 13 teams. It seems as though we're adding 1 or 2 teams a year at this point, and then have 3 guys on each side come in to play a playoff. So the top 1 in each conference would have a bye week that first playoff weekend. 2 would play 3. Then whoever the winner was would play number 1, and then the 2 winners combined. So going into this season, because they had to push everything back, they kind of went and they skipped that extra playoff push. But we have 12 teams this season, split evenly, 6 and 6 in each conference. You play, 4 points for a win. 2 points for a tie. You have 2 opportunities at bonus points. 4+ tries get you in the bonus. Within 7 points of a differential gets you into the bonus, which is a tough thing for a lot of Americans to understand when they're first learning it. So I have a good friend of mine who works for the New York Giants for the past 15 years, and I'm explaining and he's like, so you're telling me a team can lose and still get 2 points in the standings? I'm like, yeah. He goes, but they lost. I'm like, but they got bonus points, So it's getting there. So what you really have is you have all these diehard rugby fans, guys like me who have been, in the American system, watching what goes on in Europe, watching what goes on in the Southern Hemisphere. Then you have guys like my buddy Chris who are just friends, and they see it, and while they don't understand it, they enjoy it while they're watching it, right? They have no idea what's going on, but they enjoy the play. They enjoy the hit. They enjoy, actually seeing a scrum and then being explained, because in America, a lot of sporting commentators will say, oh, they're in a scrum. Meanwhile, they're just in a big fat pile punching each other, especially in hockey, right? It's not really a scrum. So when you explain to an American who what an actual scrum is and they see it, it's almost like poetry in motion. You can see their eyes like, oh, that makes sense now,
Yeah, no, totally. I was going to ask, because obviously the Major League Rugby has grown over the last 3 years, but was it in 2014-15 the Pro Rugby tried to get going, that Pro Rugby League? So how does Major League Rugby compare to Pro Rugby, and why is Major League Rugby better, essentially?
Well, I think it's the structure. So Pro Rugby, don't get me wrong. So the MLR currently owns the rights to everything, but there's individual owners for the teams, right? So the Bolton Group is the majority owner for RUNY versus Pro Rugby, where Pro owned every team. The other thing that happened with Pro Rugby is it kind of stopped. So it went from Ohio to California, and the teams were all in that area. There was nothing East Coast. And to be honest, the East Coast has a lot of rugby fans, right? And to me, it felt like, giving California 2 teams off the bat was didn't make sense to me, in Pro Rugby. The television deals they were doing were kind of like, they weren't doing it with the local television station. So it's for European fans, for UK fans. So I live in New York, right? So New York has 2 baseball teams, the Mets and the Yankees, right? They have their own television channels. So when the Mets play, they're on the Mets channel, SNY, and when the Yankees play, they're on the Yes Network. And that's just something in football. The Giants will be on a specific channel. They're usually on NBC or Fox, and then the Jets will always be on CBS, right? So because Pro Rugby didn't have that availability for everybody to see, you had to see if your cable had this package. Then it didn't have the package, you were shit out of luck. They weren't putting anything on the internet. How are you going to even watch the games as a diehard fan? So at certain points you're following it on Twitter, live Twitter feeds. It's not, and that's not fun. So I think Pro, their issue was they grew a little bit too fast, and they didn't have the availability of pushing things out. Whereas in the MLR, before they had TRN, internationally, they were still putting these matches out for free on their Facebook page, So in 2018 and 2019, if you wanted to watch American professional rugby, you could on Facebook for free, So, and that's the kind of spread that we saw internationally. And then internally, like, Rugby United New York was on SNY, the Mets channel, in 2019. This year, they're on MSG, the Madison Square Garden Network, which hosts the New York Knicks and the New York Rangers. So now you have, what you've done is you've associated that team with the big teams, right, in your state. Everybody knows the New York Knicks, right? If you're a hockey fan, you know the New York Rangers. So I think getting in that mix is really what's the difference between where Pro started and ended and where MLR has started and is starting to kind of creep up there as a professional league.
Yeah, no, that's class. What I was going to ask, sorry, I don't know why I keep saying that, but what has been your favorite moment from Major League Rugby so far?
Oh gosh, I got to be honest. A lot of people, if you're, it's hard to say. As a RUNY fan, obviously there's moments, right? So, like, for just being a RUNY fan and what in America we call being a homer, the first home match for RUNY against Toronto, where it was played in Brooklyn at MCU Park, right on the water. The ocean's right there, and behind it is the Cyclone, which is a roller coaster. a roller coaster, a famous roller coaster in Brooklyn. There we go. It's been a long day, fellas. Sorry about that. And, it was freezing cold, and Rudy won at the death. That's something you always going to remember, right? But I think overall, I would say right now would just be the completion of this season. If I was an MLR fan that had been following it, with all that happened in 2020, where week 5 we just shut down the competition. Obviously, the whole world shut down, right? You had guys like New York's James Rochford, who had a baby, came over here for 3 weeks and played, and then didn't know if he was going to get back to Cork to visit his brand new child and wife. Think about that. And then now he's playing with Rugby United New York. We played a full season. We haven't had any matches suspended due to anything COVID related. And we're almost at the time for a championship. Like, in my mind, as far as we've come, other brands probably would have shut down. They would have just kind of been killed, and that's not what happened. MLR paid all of their players who are under contract their full salary for the season. They went into a deficit to make sure the players got played, knowing that there was unknown about this COVID thing. So I think it just goes to show you, if you put the right thing in the world, the right thing's going to come back.
Yeah, dude, that's some serious planning and resilience by the league from doing all of that. Like, to have no games postponed or cancelled due to COVID this season, that's crazy. Like, that's myself and Murray, we know through the Pro 14, the amount of games we've had to sit through that didn't go ahead or whatever. Like, that's,
yeah, definitely. I mean, even just look at tonight, the Lions game got pushed back an hour because there was a COVID outbreak, and luckily it did happen, but me and Sean will go into that in further detail on the next episode. I've got a question for you, Scott, just because you mentioned that you watch the Northern Hemisphere rugby, like the Premiership and the Pro 14, and you also watch Southern Hemisphere rugby. Have you got any maybe top 5 favourite teams from across the board, apart from your beloved RUNY?
Well, I'm a big Saracens fan.
No.
I know. I was waiting for it. Listen, I've been a Saracens fan since Chris Wiles was there. I'm obviously being American. Chris Wiles was actually born, actually probably about 30 or 40 minutes away from me. So that's a big thing too. Knowing that when you first learn, not only is this guy on Team USA, and he's playing in the UK and playing in the Prem. He lives close to me, it's kind of, it's a connection when you're at that age where you're like, oh man, like that's a big deal. And, going through, got to meet TT Lamasatelli one time on my honeymoon. So I'll tell you guys this. So we went on our honeymoon to the UK. We went to London, and my wife is a big Jane Austen fan. So we went to her house and we went to the Jane Austen Museum in Bath. So of course the rugby shop wasn't open there in Bath at the time. Then we went to where she's buried at a cathedral and all this stuff. So I said, okay, the one thing I need to do is I need to try and see if I can get to a Saracens match. Knock on wood, the Saracens are playing home at the time. I think they're playing Sharks. Not only that, it's Six Nations. And in my head, when we booked it, I went, it's Six Nations. Maybe TT will get a start and I'll be able to watch. That'll be a big deal for me. And then wouldn't you know it, they put up the match day 23 and TT starting, and I'm going, holy shit. So we walk into Allianz in the pouring rain. It was freezing. And funny, we went in February, 6 days in London. It was sunny. I was wearing shorts and a t-shirt. People were looking at me like I was weird because back in New York, it was like 8 degrees, freezing. So it was summer to me. Anyway, we get there, we walk through the rain, we go to Allianz, and they're warming up, and I'm like, oh shit, there's TT. So the only kit I had was my USA kit. So I just open it up. I'm like, TT, and I start going like this. He stopped what he was doing to come over and talk to me in the middle of him preparing. Like, they're going to kick off in 10 minutes. And he came over to speak to me because he knew I was a USA fan. And that's something that I think is trying to transfer over in the US game. And we'll talk about that later. But I mean, Southern Hemisphere, I'm a Blues guy. I'm an Auckland Blues guy. I mean, I can always go for a good Scottish team if I need to.
Edinburgh. Don't go Glasgow, Scott.
I got to.
No.
So okay. So who's your football team then?
Football team. I don't really follow football, but I am a Rangers guy. To be honest.
God, me and you just are not clicking on any level.
We're not vibing at all.
I'm a big hoops guy. I'm a big hoops guy.
So just to make it even worse, I'm an XR Chiefs fan. I don't actually have a Southern Hemisphere team. I like all the New Zealand franchises. Just sit back, enjoy the game, and so Edinburgh Rugby and XR Chiefs are and Scotland, obviously. Obviously supporting your country. Just because you mentioned Chris Wiles, and to be fair, he was a good player when he was at start. What do you think of Joe Taffetti and David Ainutu in the top 14 in France? Fun fact, just before you answer that, David Ainutu and Joe Taffetti actually follow me on Instagram. I don't know why, but it came out they started following me, so I was like, all right, thank you.
That's awesome, right? Isn't that cool? Who just started? The MLR just started liking some of my posts on Instagram, and I'm like, what the? I was like, why'd they hear me? I mean, maybe they hear me like on the television screen, which apparently when you're watching a RUNY match, I sit right on the field level, and apparently you can hear me screaming. My mother has told me multiple times, so she's told me to watch my mouth. But anyway, I think it's great to have those guys move over because we like to say on the Rugby Rant, iron sharpens iron. So the better competition you're going to play in, the better you're going to be. And unfortunately, McGinty, you were saying tearing it up for sale, and he tore his knee up.
He tore his knee. He tore it too hard. He went too hard tearing it. But yeah.
But he was just named their player of the year, I think, for this season. So I mean, it just goes to show you that we have rugby players in America that can translate into different organizations and different unions to play professionally and work there. I mean, Nick Savetta was Lancaster for a while. He heard USA. I kind of knew he was going to come to RUNY at some point. He's from the area. Again, another guy who literally could have lived down the block from me, and Nick Savetta. And I think we were talking about he learned to play rugby in college.
Yeah.
Plays as an Eagle, starts as an Eagle, and played in the championship and in France. So I mean, and in Italy. So it just goes to show you can learn those skills and play in an upper level and go play around the world. And it also helps that he was a lock and was born 7 feet tall because you really can't height. Yeah, God gives you the height. He might not give you the rugby skill, but he gives you that 7 feet.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I've mentioned this to Sean. This was like a little off joke before we started recording, before I even knew you were coming on the show. I could only name 5 US players, maybe 6, and that's covering 15 sevens and women's rugby. So it's AJ McGinty, David Ainutu, Joe Taffetti, Perry Baker, Caroline Isles, and Ilona Meyer of the women's sevens. So that's the only 6 I could name.
Dude, Alona's first of all, if you're watching, follow her on TikTok and Instagram. 1, she's funny. And 2, you should get your friends to follow her. She's doing a 12-part series on how rugby sevens is played in the Olympics. And I've been literally just pulling her videos and throwing it on the Rugby Rant account because I want people to learn what's going to go on. She tells you exactly how the pool play works and the whole 9 yards. So check her out on Instagram and TikTok. Again, she does funny stuff, but I think this particular series about how sevens works is eye-opening for fans who've never watched it before.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I already follow Ilona on Instagram and TikTok. Yeah. I threw a shot to see if she would come on the show. She's not seen the message yet, so if she's listening, I thought she would be. But there you go. There's our second call out. There you go. So you're a Saracens fan. Are you still a Saracens fan? Are you loyal to the fan base? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, I was part of the Saracens Supporters Association, Saturdays on tour, still have friends. As a matter of fact, so me as a RUNY fan, my good friend Jason, who's a RUNY fan, I met him through the Saracens Supporters Association. He lives in Pennsylvania. So Jason travels about 3.5 hours each way to go to a RUNY home match because that's the closest. That's the closest club to him. And we also have another friend who's an Old Glory fan because she lives in Virginia, and Sue Parks. So us 3 knew each other before the MLR started because we were all Saracens fans in the same fan club. And then when the MLR started, we all came together and said, who are we watching? Who are we picking? What matches are we going to? So it's really cool to say you knew somebody before the MLR as a fan and why, I find it cool.
Well, you might find this interesting. Me, Sean, and Simeon, who isn't with us today, we've never been in the same room. We've never properly met.
Okay, you want to hear something interesting?
Go for it.
Me, Ty Braga, and Rob Hammerschmidt, the other 2 hosts of the Rugby Rant, have never met before either. We
There you
started
go. See,
the exact same way.
just natural connections, rugby connections. There you go. That's just feed the podcast a bit more there.
As a matter of fact, the reason the show started was me and Rob got into a fight about Matthew Bastro, because Rob, for being a coach and a referee and being like 55 years old, we got talking about Matthew Bastro, and it was one of those conversations where it wasn't something that devolved into what we've seen people. Conversations devolve into ugly rugby talk and nasty stuff. Me and him had point for point about why each other was wrong respectfully. And it was in Ty Braga's little Facebook group. And he said, why don't we put this on camera? And it's been 18 months and, over 100 shows. And we're getting people to interview like George Killebrew, the commissioner of the MLR, Gary Gold, Team USA head coach. And, it's kind of grown from there. It's like, I still kind of pinch myself when we get guests on, like Todd Clever was on recently and I'm like, holy shit, it's Todd Clever. I'm like, holy, like it, and you fanboy over people and it happens so much. It happens to RUNY. I tell everybody, I watched Kyle Sumption play rugby forever. He was on, so in pro rugby, I took Sacramento. I claimed Sacramento as my team. Yep. 4 of those guys ended up being on RUNY in 2019. And I still, I see Kyle all the time. Kyle kind of lives close to me and I see him in the street and I'm like, he's like, why do you do that? I'm like, I don't know, man. It's like, you're at a certain level that I feel I'm never going to be at. So I just got to kind of get it out and it might take a little while,
That's fair. I mean, like, because you were on about star-studded guests, I got the chance to interview David Rowe, who was part of the 1962 British and Irish Lions tour. And just hearing about like rugby history and how it was for him, it was mesmerising. And hopefully we're getting a bit more star-studded lineups soon. Can't really drop names yet because they've not been confirmed.
Yeah,
but...
of course. It's fun. You're always pushing, and as people hear you and see you, and you kind of get the word out. And we kind of did that for the women's national team. I had a friend who's on the women's national team. So Tess Fury, she's probably going to be starting at fullback for the Eagles in 15s. I know her brother Jake through RUNY, and I said, hey, come on the show. Can we clear it with, the Eagles PR and all that? And that's always a challenge. Cleared it. She came on. She did great. That put us, on the next one. It was Kate Zachary was the next one, and we interviewed her all the way from London. And, we're looking to build that, and you build those relationships and you get good interviews. And I don't think we've had an interview with somebody in rugby that was bad or that didn't have high energy or that didn't give you a tidbit of something you may not have known. And now you have that knowledge. And I think, toot our own horns here, I think we're all doing a great job, guys.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like you're going in the right direction. I mean, obviously Sean knows like the backroom calls it, like our messages that I try and put out, and like, I'm not dropping names or anything in here, but like I took a shot. What day is this? For Thursday? No, Tuesday today.
Wednesday for me.
Wednesday, right? So it's it's Wednesday here. Sorry, it's been a long day. I messaged Sean on Monday saying that I got in touch with a professional club and it went a lot better than I thought.
Yeah. I'm telling you, they're starting to realize the value in quote unquote non-mainstream media, although podcasting is mainstream, especially going about it with fans who are just fans. I don't like the New England Free Jacks. We've interviewed 3 New England Free Jacks players and one of the owners of the team. Because while I hate them on the field, it's rugby culture, right? We love them off the field. And why wouldn't I want to put everybody in their best light out in the universe of whatever, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube, and whatever we're doing. So, I mean, I think it's just a common thing. And you'll see, again, like if you put it out right, it'll come back to you tenfold right.
Yeah, well said, Scott. I mean, you're definitely living like our embodiment is for the fans, by the fans. And from what you're telling me so far, you're definitely in that mantra as well. So
I tried.
So fair play to you.
Yeah. Scott, actually, one last question I have for you. Obviously, you've talked about this on the Rugby Rant podcast before, but a few weeks ago it was confirmed that USA have submitted their bid for the 2027 and 2031 Rugby World Cups. So how likely do you think it is, first of all, that USA will get it? And how important would you think that is for USA Rugby as a whole to get a World Cup?
I don't think we're going to get 2027. I think that's a little too close, too early for me. because if you look at things now in the MLR, like, so for example, and you can blame this on COVID. So Rugby United New York had to play their home matches at Cochrane Stadium. And the thing is, you guys don't have the kind of weather we have, right? So, for example, in one day, I got 33 inches of snow in just one day last winter. Yeah. So to have a grass pitch, first of all, to own property in New York, then have a grass pitch and pay the taxes and do everything, and have the permits to sell beer, have the permits to sell food. It's insane how much it costs, right? So you take a club like Rugby United New York and they have to rent a lot of things. And then COVID, who wanted fans, back starting in March, right? It was still before people were vaccinated and things like that in this country. So they get Cochrane Stadium, which is a municipal field. The city, Jersey City owns it in New Jersey. Well, because it's municipal, it has soccer lines, American football lines, American lacrosse lines, and field hockey lines. And, it's something that a normal rugby fan looks at it, especially, internationally, goes, what the hell is this? But that's kind of what we have right now, right? Don't get me wrong. You can try and do it in NFL stadiums. And I'm sure in 2031, by the time this picks up, you'll have these NFL stadiums that are going to have Rugby World Cup matches. But it's all those little pool matches that I feel it would be a struggle right now, or in the next 4 years, to find a place to play. In the MLR right now, in touch areas aren't the same length in a bunch of places. So, for example, where Free Jacks played, their in touch area or in goal area is like, I don't know, 4.5 meters or something long, yeah, it's ridiculous. So it's just not standardized in that way because of the way, where and when people have to play. So, and then you get weird things like, like I said, the grassy turf instead of grass. You get these weird bounces, and guys don't know how to play them until they know how to play them. So I think until you can standardize some of the smaller pitches and venues, which is what I think could happen 10 years from now to do this, and not necessarily 4 years from now to do this, or whatever it is, 3 years from now, that's when you'll get the actual go ahead from World Rugby to say you can actually host this because you can host X, 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 and X. And to be honest, I think it should be a North American bid because Canada, why not have Canada involved, to be quite honest? At this point, obviously crossing the border is tough, but we're talking 10 years from now, we shouldn't be in a COVID world. Crossing the Canadian border is very easy for Americans, and vice versa. So, I think it should be a dual bid, but a North American bid, quote unquote. And once we have those facilities to maintain those pool matches, I think we'll be good to go.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm sure there's definitely a load of challenges, but do you think that it would have a big impact? Obviously, we saw in Japan the amount of school kids that took up rugby from the World Cup, and the amount of numbers increased tenfold nearly. Do you think that would have a massive effect for USA rugby in North America as a whole? Or?
I want to say yes, but I'm a little hesitant. We have, I coach American youth football, and we have such a decline in contact sports for youth. And we teach what we call the rugby tackle, which the Seahawks, as Murray knows, perfected, the wrap and roll style tackle. So we've made the game safer, and we have HIA in American rugby, essentially, in American football, essentially at the youth level, where if a referee or coach thinks you have an head injury, you're out for the entire match until you get seen by your own medical professional. So it's left off the field. Nobody's going to clear you on the field. If they think you had a head injury, you're out. Your helmet's taken away. I think that's still going to scare parents, regardless if you show them touch rugby, and you show them all the nice South Africans in their bare feet playing, the contact is still going to scare them. So I wonder if it's going to be as big of a push now that there are all these CTE concerns. And to be honest, I played 8 years of American football. I played 10 years of hockey contact. I played 4 years of rugby. I played 3 years of lacrosse. I have a bachelor's. I have a master's. I work in corporate America. So let's be honest, most kids aren't going to get to that level to have CTE anyway, because they're not playing in college Division I professional. So I think, people need to temper their expectations about what happens playing. And we'll see. So I want to be optimistic that it's going to create this boom, but also I do kind of see the writing on the wall where parents might not want their children to play. It's just the reality we live in here.
Yeah. You mentioned it there. You just mentioned about sevens or whatever, but I know sevens is pretty big over in the US. Is sevens bigger than 15s currently? Because obviously there's a load of teams and tournaments over there. But how is it over there? I
would say commercially sevens is probably bigger because the Sevens tournament in Las Vegas was always on television. It was always on NBC. AEG, I forgot what the acronym means, but Dan Lyle, who is former USA Eagle, is with them. They're like an entertainment group, and they knew what they were doing when they put it in Vegas. It was a party atmosphere. People would, the next day, I can't wait to go to Vegas next year to have this party atmosphere. They'd show it on television, and it was very out there. So I think commercially, yes, it's on the Olympics. We have the Sevens now. It's in LA, but with TRN, with getting these local news outlets to cover 15s and getting fans, we're not getting a lot of fans, but we're getting enough right now. And if we can grow that fan base in 15s, I think it'll completely swallow what was going on in Sevens. But like I said, Sevens right now, a little bit bigger of a pop. But again, that was more just because they were on TV a lot.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
That's fair. Simeon asked us to ask a question. It was I think he meant it as a serious question, but it's more of a jokey question. But I'll ask it anyway. So, Northern Hemisphere referee JP Doyle is now over in the MLR. What do you have your opinions on JP being in the MLR, Scott?
I think any professional referee that wants to come and apply their trade in the MLR is a good thing. I think because it's such America has such quote unquote niche sports with American football and baseball and hockey, and it's not really, it's more North American than it is international. We need to have those international referees come in. Again, like I was talking about with the players, iron sharpens iron, same thing. You have these international referees come in who've been officiating these bigger matches, these bigger tournaments, whatever. And now you're getting the MLR to do it, and you're kind of just getting in lockstep with how they're going to officiate a game or a match in the international level. Personally, I didn't like a couple of his calls, RUNY against Free Jacks, and I'll tell you what they were. He called advantage several times for RUNY, but then brought it back to the AR after RUNY had essentially, then maybe Sean saw it 2 or 3 times, we're running to score a try. So it's either advantage and they're going to score the try, or advantage should have been called over immediately, and then you speak to the assistant referee. So I didn't understand that, especially the last one where Troy Lockyer was running down the sideline with nobody there, and all of a sudden he blows it dead to speak to the assistant referee, and the assistant said, "Well, it was a penalty that it was an infraction that New England had." And I said, "Then why'd you stop the damn play?"
Yeah, that's a strange one. Like you mentioned about like referees doing like bigger games and all that. Like obviously Ben Foden, Matthew Bassero that you've mentioned, Chris Robshaw, just to name a few. How do you feel on Tendai Mtarawira as well, obviously known as the Beast? How do you feel like those big, like first tier players coming over to the MLR help expand it in a way?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's how we got French fans to become RUNY fans, because Matthew Bastrero was there. And to talk about Bastrero, he still likes my shit on Twitter. He still likes he follows RUNY. Like I've seen him in his Instagram posts watching TRN, following. Unfortunately, another guy sitting injured in France and just rehabbing for now. When he decided to watch rugby, he went back to one of his old clubs in the United States. Poor Chris Robshaw, man. He friggin' dislocated the same shoulder twice. Poor friggin' guy. It's funny. A lot of these guys, for whatever reason, because the Beast in 2020, he had quad issues. RUNY has Juan Manuel Leguzman. First 15 minutes, he makes a play, takes a step, and tears his knee. Like it's almost uncanny that like these guys can't stay healthy for whatever reason. They're in the except for Ben Foden. Knock on wood, Ben Foden's good. As a matter of fact, check out his Instagram. He had like 3 or 4 stitches under the eye. I don't know if Vogue's going to call him for that photo shoot they want him for. He put his face. He used his face. It was great. But I think it hooks in rugby fans like me to say, hey, they're invested. I mean, Ben Foden lives here in New York. He doesn't like go back to England or Ireland. I know his wife's Irish. And he goes, like you'll see, he goes to concerts here and he brings the guys. Like they went and watched, Brooklyn basketball when they were in the playoffs to bond with the team. So to me, it seems like these guys are buying into it, and that's what I like to see. Just a few more. It's probably going to be the same answer, but I just realised that there's a few Scottish players across in the MLR now. Dougie Fife,
Adam Ash and Glenn Bryce. Just want to know how you think they're getting on. I know Dougie Fife's been doing relatively well.
And Dougie Fife can kiss my ass because he was part of that New England team that beat RUNY this past weekend. No, but he's been doing great. No, he's been doing great. Adam Ash has been friggin' outstanding too. I mean, and I think Scottish Rugby Union is what, like a minority owner in the Old Glory,
Yeah, so partnership with Old Glory DC.
Yeah. So it's, you see that these rugby unions want to be part of America. They want to be part of this giant. And it's funny, you think that they would be outgrowing themselves, and they're not. I think they're growing at a steady pace that's setting themselves up for a big pop eventually. Because sometimes if you have that pop too soon in that bubble burst, you never get it back, right? Yeah. So I think the MLR, by doing this, a lot, the ownership has changed a lot in the MLR. So like RUNY, for example, was really under a single owner. He was bought out by the Bolton Group and two guys who used to run Stade. So you see the Bolton Group, who was part of Auckland Blues. You see two guys who used to be with Stade Francais. Why else would you be part of it unless you thought it was on a trajectory to do well, And to me as a fan, that's what I see, and that's a positive,
Well, yeah, I totally agree with you on that one, Scott. All I'm saying is, if going back to the Rugby World Cup, if the US host it, Rugby Connection and Rugby Rant are gonna probably get drunk together more than anything. But yeah, definitely.
No, yeah, I'm hope so. I want to try and go to the next World Cup, but I don't think my wife will let me. But it is what it is. Got to play by her rules. But yeah, no, definitely. If you guys come over, even if it's next time Scotland plays the Eagles in a test match and it's over here, come over. When Ireland's coming over in October. I don't know if Shawnee's making a trip yet.
I'm not too sure. I don't know if I have that money yet. I'll have to see.
It was funny. I booked my 5th wedding anniversary weekend, and it's the week before, and then like 2 weeks later, after I booked it, they're like, "Oh yeah, by the way, we're playing Ireland in Vegas." Like, shit.
I was caught between two nights to save up for France 2023, or do I go to the Lions against Japan game at Murrayfield? I got the Lions tickets, and my ticket was valid, so I've had my like once in a lifetime ticket opportunity. So, but yeah, if the USA ever come across here, like they're across here now, they're playing Ireland next week. Let's just get a little instigation on who's going to win, lads.
Listen, I hear this. So if you guys are watching my show, the Rugby Rant, I say Ireland beats us by 20. The only reason is I think Ireland and Japan was way too close to beating Ireland, and those guys are going to have a statement game saying that was a fluke. So I think they're going to play a little harder and play a little differently and want to punch the U.S. in the mouth. So I'm going to say the point differential, I think they beat USA by 20, but that's just because they kind of have something a little more to play for.
Yeah. That's fair. USA did do very well against England. We discussed that in depth on our show last week because episode 5's not long came out. So episode 4 we discussed that in depth, and yeah, fair play is I think you definitely caught England sleeping anyway, and that's what the issue is. Where you are a tier 2 nation in like rugby perspective. So if you get caught sleeping, doesn't matter what team it is. If you get caught sleeping, then they're going to hurt you or try and do some damage for the main.
I mean, and also, a lot of people were saying, oh, well, England had 12 debutants. Well, USA had 6. TT Lamis not playing, AJ McGinty not playing, Will Hooley not playing. You had a whole bunch of guys who couldn't compete due to injury. So in my mind, you were playing the USA B squad anyway. So it was the England B or C squad versus the USA B squad. So It was funny because there was a lot of English players going, or a lot of English fans going, oh, but you played the B squad. And I'm like, yeah, but you played the American B squad. So what are we talking about? It was interesting. Well, because they don't know the American game. So they're just assuming we're always putting the best team out on the field. And that just wasn't the case in this, this tour. And we're trying to get some of the young guys in the back line together. So for those fans that don't watch USA Eagles, we have a pretty set front pack, even though we had a bunch of injuries. The caps are there. The guys are Nate Brakely, Nick Savetta, Hanko Hermosites, Cam Dolan, so those guys, perennial Eagles. And then the back line is a little younger, a lot of on-cap players, but that's how Gary Gold wanted it, so It's just, I think, a different perspective. And I think what needs to happen is like we, as an American, I will research what's going on when we play England and Ireland. I feel like the UK fans don't research what's going on for American rugby, and they should start because that gap is starting to close.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when the squads were announced, like I mentioned to you earlier, I only know 6 players across like all of USA rugby, and 3 of them just happened to play for the men's 15 side, and 2 did play against England. So I was like, yes, that's my boy. It's like, stuff like that. But yeah, definitely like tier 2 nations. So like USA, Canada, Fiji, Samoa, maybe not Tonga because that's a touchy subject at the moment. That they're all like pushing and doing well, and because like people are sleeping on them, just out of sheer stubbornness more than anything. And that's like how they get in this course. See if you actually like watch their games, you'll understand why. And it's crazy.
Yeah, and it's and you could tell, like like I said, with the Americans, certain guys didn't get a start. My buddy Hanko Hermesice, I mean, the dude's a perennial starter. For whatever reason, didn't get a start because they wanted to play some other guys. Came in, and 3 minutes later, he scored a try using his head, running over a bunch of English players. And again, so in my head, I went, okay, they put out the team that they want to kind of gel a little bit versus maybe the best team to beat England. And that's always something that is, I think, on the tier 2 nation's mind, especially in Rugby Canada and Team USA, is not necessarily winning, but what are you trying to do to set up for maybe the next World Cup or the Canadian qualifiers are the next biggest matches for us. The game against Ireland, it's a moneymaker, but it doesn't really help us, on the world stage, right? But those qualifiers against Canada to get that number 1 spot for the Rugby World Cup. Now, that's what I think Gary Gould's aiming at.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, hopefully that you get past the qualifiers and you're into the World Cup. We can't complete. We're already qualified, so we are going head to head, though, aren't we, Sean? So
yeah, we are. That's going to be interesting. But Scott, last question for me anyway before we finish up. If you could look into your crystal ball and look to the MLR Championship final, who's going to play and what's the score going to be?
I mean, my heart says RUNY. I'd say my heart says a rematch between RUNY and Utah, and the previous match this season saw Utah winning by 1 in a very tight match. But honestly, LA has remained unbeaten against all their Western Conference opponents. They've lost to 3 Eastern Conference opponents. So if they continue that run, they have smooth sailing going in. And to be honest, between NOLA, RUNY, and Atlanta, it's hard to pick who. So RUNY has beaten Atlanta twice, even though Atlanta is number 1 in the conference. Atlanta has beaten NOLA twice, and NOLA and RUNY. NOLA won the first one, and the second one's coming up. So between the top 3 guys, it could be that they've each beat each other twice. If I had to drill down, I'd probably say Atlanta. They were the least hurt, I feel, with the internationals. So they've kind of maintained some continuity there in their team. So my heart says RUNY versus Utah. My head says Atlanta versus LA. And Atlanta beat LA the first time. And if they're at a neutral field, I'd say LA by 3 because they want something to prove, but it would be a tough match.
Yeah, any of those teams playing in the final seems like they'd be exciting games. And it'd be a nice bit of a change to not see San Diego and Seattle playing in the final round.
Yeah, unfortunately, they're bottom of the barrel this season. San Diego due to injuries. Seattle was a little more. It's funny because I think Austin was this way in 2019, where organizationally they were kind of in disarray, and it kind of dripped down to management and field level. And I think that's what hurt Seattle this season. But expect them to come back strong, and San Diego to come back strong next season, and put a whooping on the Giltinis.
Right, absolutely. I like those calls. Well, I think we've pretty much said everything we want. Murray, do you have anything else you want to say? Or
no, I think I've learned a lot, especially about USA rugby and the MLR. So just thanks, Scott, for giving me an insight, and but change your Premiership team, please.
No, I have the Fez. I was actually, I was on TV when they played. Who they played? They played Newcastle and Philadelphia, and I was on whenever they were broadcasting in the UK, and I was on television holding the banner with my fez on and everything. It was great.
That's quite cool. I'll let you off then.
Scott, if people want to find you online, where can they find you?
So you can check us out at Rugby Rant Pod on all social media. That show, we have our RPK, Run, Pass, or Kick interviews on Monday nights. And then you can check out our actual Rugby Rant episodes on Friday on TRN every Friday morning. And then if you want to catch kind of like deleted scene episode type stuff, Thursday night before on our Facebook page at Rugby Rant Pod. You kind of get a little more out of those episodes than you would in TRN. And follow me for Rugby United news at RUNY fans on all social media. And if you're ever in the New York City area and RUNY's playing, contact me. I'll get you some tickets. We'll go out. If you're in the New York City area and you want to do anything as far as rugby, go to my buddy Cormac's Bar, the Pig and Whistle on 36th Street. It is literally the #1 rugby bar in the country. I'll put it this way: when like Lions, Six Nations, anything Rugby World Cup related, if you don't get there 2 to 3 hours early, you're not getting in. So go check out the Pig and Whistle on 36th Street in Manhattan. If you're in the area and there's no rugby going on, you can catch some rugby there. And they probably have the best pint of Guinness I've ever drank in North America. So
one thing I will say is Matt McCarthy would like that shout out there anyway.
Oh yeah. I love Matty. Matty's great. I love seeing him at the RUNY matches, and that he does his stuff there. So it's awesome. To me, as you see, I have a terrible setup for my show. Matt gets to do it at the #1 rugby pub in America. So
yeah, no. Well, Scott, thanks a million for coming on. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone. That's been episode 4 of Guest Thursdays on the Rugby Connection podcast, and we'll see you all next week.